But Chris, thank you. This is fun, and I really enjoyed the last one, and this will be a fun opportunity. I wanted to do a sort of combo of like trying out something new while at the same time sort of expanding on something that I've been doing with my students in the classroom, and framing it in a slightly different way. So you can see I'm talking about applying cognitive behavioral therapy to developing characters, and I talked about this actually. I was at a film festival in Iowa in the fall. And so I did a sort of preliminary little talk about this. I was sort of putting together my thoughts, and it's kind of, in many ways based on what I've been doing for several years, but I thought I'd just sort of pull it together for you guys and sort of test it out and see what you think. So just the sort of quick basics on cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't know, I'm someone who's been in therapy for a decade or more, and my therapist was really good at using cognitive behavioral therapy to help me with some of my sort of spinning thoughts. And so the basics of it are just that you have thoughts, and those thoughts produce feelings. And then because you have those feelings, you take certain actions. And it's been something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of screenwriting, because of course we can't find a way to articulate how our characters, what they're thinking and what they're feeling, except through their actions and their dialogue, right? So like what they say and what they do are an indication of what they're thinking and what they're feeling, of course, unless we have voiceovers, right? But sort of when we're teaching, at least in this sort of helping our students who are accustomed to reading fiction, to reading novels and short stories, they're really accustomed to sort of getting into the characters' heads. And I don't know about you guys, but certainly in my introductory screenwriting classes, that's one of the biggest hurdles, is helping them recognize, okay, well, we can't use the action portion of the screenplay to describe what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and instead just it's action, right? So this is the sort of basics of cognitive behavioral therapy, but I like to look at it like this in sort of the three column chart, because it's really easier for me to talk with the students about, like, okay, this is the thought that they're having, and that thought leads to that feeling, and then they take an action because of that. And you can sort of imagine, if you were in therapy, like what the thoughts might be, and then what the feelings might be, and then what the actions. But of course, we're looking for, when we're working with our screenwriting students, we're looking for active behaviors. We're looking for sort of, we don't want somebody staying in bed. If they're depressed, we don't want them just staying in bed. That's going to be pretty boring. Nor do we want them to get out of bed and sit in front of a computer and write. That's also going to be pretty boring, right? But it's a sort of good way to start sort of thinking about, okay, here are those columns, right? We can't describe the thoughts, we can't describe the feelings, we can only describe the actions, right? So that's the column. So the question is, what is behind that action? What's underneath that action? So I want to just go back quickly to when I showed you that first image that I pulled from Wikipedia. There was the triangle in the middle. I'm not sure who wrote this, Ertstadt, but they said that the diagram depicts how feelings, thoughts, and behaviors all influence each other. The triangle in the middle represents cognitive behavioral therapy's tenet that all humans' core beliefs can be organized using three categories: self, others, and future. So how we relate as individuals, as human beings, to the people around us, and how that makes us think about the future, which of course is addressing something like anxiety, right? Like if you have anxiety about the future. So this is the human being's core beliefs. When we apply this to characters, of course, we recognize that as the character's worldview, right? So we are familiar with that understanding that all of our characters have a worldview that shapes everything that they do, their actions that they take, the dialogue that they engage in. So I want to just think about why characters have that kind of worldview, right? So this is what we're working with our students, to have them look at their characters and really figure out what their worldview is, because that's going, and of course we're trying to build a collection of characters who are going to be really interesting to have them in the same space, right? Because their worldviews are in some way in conflict with each other, right? So we're trying to create conflict, but we want it to add up. We want it to make sense. We don't want it to be, okay, let's put a character, this character has this worldview, this character has and have it be something artificial. We want it to be really authentic to who they are and for the story. So I wanted to give you guys an example, which is an example that I was just working with the students. Oh, well, first, let me just say this. So why the worldview might happen is an event from the past. Now, we all understand, so like this is the backstory, right? We understand that sometimes characters just are who they are, and there wasn't some kind of traumatic event that made them into this person, right? That's definitely a valid and of course, but it feels like a really good starting place for what is some kind of event that happened in their past, that backstory that helps them have this worldview. My students today, I don't know about yours, but everybody's talking a lot about trauma. And so they're sort of relating traumatic experiences that they had that are impacting their lives right now, and make them have these thoughts and feelings and behaviors that they do, right? So we think about this in terms of internal conflict for our characters. This is what they're sort of struggling with. But it's just interesting to me to put it in that real psychological, like, I don't know, I like it, and it's been fun for the students too. But I wanted to give you guys this example from This Is Us. Have you all seen This Is Us, the TV show? Some of you have. Okay, good. Yeah. Dan Fogelman, who created the show, I love Dan Fogelman so much. I love all of his work, and I just think he's so incredibly talented. But in the pilot episode, we were just studying this, so I thought I'd show you guys as well. So in the pilot episode for This Is Us, he's very successfully, I think some people do this in a way that's not so successful, but he gives each one of the three main children in the show. So Randall, I think you can probably see my pointer. This is Randall, this is Kevin, and this is Kate. So these are the three grown children in the show. And in the pilot episode, he gives each of them the opportunity to have a monologue where they are expressing their trauma. In some way, they are expressing their trauma. And then it's a great way to set up the whole show, because of course we understand that this is what they're going to be struggling with and dealing with throughout the whole series, which went on. So let me move this so I can see this. So Kevin, early on, a minute 4 in the pilot episode, it's the monologue is revised, but I'll read it for you. So 36, wow, I wanted to change the world. Now I'm the Manny. The Manny is he's on a sort of sitcom where he takes his shirt off all the time, and he's just he's just a sort of fluffy sitcom actor. He's not considered a great actor. You know what? And he's in this scene here during this monologue, he's dancing with two strippers, two much younger strippers in their 20s. And he says, you know when it all went bad for me? Second grade, 1986. They were sending the Challenger into space. Do you remember the Challenger? Don't answer that. Krista McAuliffe, she was a teacher. She was going to be the first teacher in space. It was a huge deal. First teacher in space. She was going to change the world. Don't know how, but you felt that. At least in second grade, you felt that. Middle of the day in school, they bring a TV into class. We're all watching the launch, the whole class of 8-year-olds just watching. Then boom, the thing just explodes. Little pieces of sweet Krista McAuliffe are raining all over Florida. Our teacher shut that TV off like it was on fire. She literally wheeled it out of the room. Kids were hysterical. It was awful. I wonder if that was the moment I decided that changing the world just leads you to blowing up into pieces all over Florida. Maybe that's how I wound up as the Manny. So that's 4 minutes into the pilot episode. He has this opportunity to express the trauma that happened in his life, and here's what his core conflict and his worldview is. why he makes all the choices that he makes in as the series progresses. Right after this scene, he gets a phone call from his sister who was just weighing herself. She is an obese young woman, 36 years old, and has been struggling with her weight all of her life, and she was weighing herself and fell off the scale. So he has to go to her rescue. And they're sitting there together, and she says, "We're 36, officially late 30s. I know," he says. "How did I get here? How the hell did I get here?" And he says, "Do you remember the third grade, the Challenger explosion? You've got to stop with the Challenger explosion." Yeah, another beat. Kate continues eating ice cream. I cut out a little tiny bit. "I had this whole dream life I envisioned for myself. I wanted a real career. I wanted to marry a man like dad. I wanted to be a mom like mom. Look at me, Kevin. I ate my dream life away." "What are you looking for me here, sis? Give me the magic phrase that will make you feel better and I'll say it. Tell me to stop feeling sorry for myself. Tell me to wake the hell up. Tell me to lose the fucking weight. Stop feeling sorry to yourself. Wake the hell up." What was the last one? Lose the fucking weight. So we know from this what she's struggling with. We don't know why. We don't know what the traumatic event was for her, but we know that there was a traumatic event. We can sort of surmise. I won't spoil it for those of you who haven't seen the show, but there was a very significant traumatic event that we find out that caused this, and it's her feelings of guilt surrounding that traumatic event that caused her to be in the position that she's in. So now, third sibling, Randall, who was adopted. And in the pilot episode, about 10, 12 minutes later, he has been searching for his birth father, and he goes to, he finds the birth father, and he goes to the door. The door opens. Before Randall stands his biological father, William Hill, 72, the same man from the picture, but in person, William is even older, more beaten up. He's seen better days. "Can I help you?" Randall launches in. "My name is Randall Peasing. I'm your biological son. 36 years ago, you left me. No, hold on, let me say this. 36 years ago, you left me at the front door of a fire station. Don't worry, I'm not here because I want anything from you. Don't need a hug, don't need any money. I was raised by two incredible parents. I have a lights out family of my own. And that car you see parked out front of your house cost $104,000. I bought it in cash. I bought it in cash because I felt like it and because I can do shit like that. You see, I turned out pretty all right," which might surprise a lot of folks considering the fact that 36 years ago, my life started out with you leaving me on a fire station doorstep with nothing but a ratty blanket and a crap-filled diaper. I came here today so I could look you in the eye, say that to you, and then get back in my fancy ass car and finally prove to myself and to you and to my family who loves me that I didn't need a fucking thing from you, even after I knew who you were. A beat, then. Would you like to come in? Okay. And they head inside. I would have played this for you, but I know sometimes it messes up over Zoom when you try to show clips. So obviously all TV shows, all movies don't have the characters reveal in a monologue form what their trauma is, what their trauma from the past was, and what their worldview is. It's not so sort of blatantly obvious. But the fact of the matter is, all of our characters will have a worldview. They will have a belief system about how they relate to the rest of the world, to other people in the world. And you know what? It will be negative because we want conflict. We want some kind of internal struggle. And so, thinking about what that traumatic event from their past might have been, that caused this belief. And I'll stop sharing my screen now because that's it for my slides. But that, there we are. It's just a starting place for discussion about how we can create these backstories for the characters to help them shape their worldview. What I tell the students and what I've actually talked about in therapy, which sounds so basic and so ridiculous in terms of my traumatic event. But like as a human being, I have this sense that like I can't take care of everybody all the time, and I'm going to leave somebody behind, and I'm going to fail somebody. And that's why I'm constantly like trying to juggle everybody. And so, okay, well, Anna, why do we think you feel this way? And then there was this traumatic event for me when I was 11 and babysitting, and I had a little baby there was a big fair going on, and this baby that I was taking care of was 8 months old, and we were on a swing, and I was swinging him, and there was a little girl who was swinging next to me, and she was probably 5. And I don't know how it happened, but she like jumped off the swing, and the swing hit her and cut a triangle shape out of her upper lip, and blood was like, it was like an artery. So it was like this. So I had a choice to make, which was, what do I do? So the choice that I made as an 11-year-old girl was I put the baby down, I put Cameron down, and I picked up this girl and ran with her into the crowd to try and find the mother. And of course I was like soaked in blood. and and in the end, I'm just like incredibly lucky that this poor 8-month-old baby was fine when I ran back to him. Of course, his parents are like, "Where's the baby? Where's the baby?" So it's such a small, silly, stupid thing, right? But it's no smaller than Kevin's space shuttle exploding and seeing it, right? Like it affected me in some way, possibly. Maybe it was something else that made me feel the way I feel. um, so, so, so that tends to be a starting point. And what I typically do with my students is like give them an option. Do you want to talk about an event that you feel like shaped your worldview or in some way positioned you in the world in a way that you have this belief system? Or do you want to just take a moment here and think of some traumatic events that might have happened for your character? Just pick a character. I just got some kind of notification. I'm going to say don't allow. And the students tend to, I would say about half of them want to share, want to talk first, and it ends up being a good starting point because it does open up these possibilities for like, ooh, that's a big traumatic event. That's a big, and then we have this sort of range of traumatic events, and then we can go to pen and paper. So I thought maybe we could open this up, and I would treat you all in the same way I treat the students, which is say, if anybody wants to share their own kind of event that you feel like shaped you in some way, we can do that. But I want to just make sure we save enough time because I do want to try these monologues that I have the students do. Roseanne.
I had to find the mic to unmute myself because I don't use Google Teams all the time. Hey, everybody. This is so wonderful. I'm so glad that I had the time this morning to stop in. I use a phrase that I'm told comes from Tennessee Williams to basically explain exactly this, which is apparently he once said that all writers work from the emotions of the first 6 years of their lives. And I kind of thought, well, that's bullshit. We've had much more happen to us later in life. And then I realized in all the writing that I've done for television, every episode that I was writing happened to be involving a workaholic dad who ignored his children, an alcoholic dad who was a problem, a domestic abuse situation where the dad was violent. And I realized that my dad left when I was 6 years old. So clearly I don't remember it in the way that is like a traumatic moment, but it must have done something to me because I have constantly written about men teaching them to be better fathers. So I have students sort of talk about stuff like that. And I do think it makes a lot of sense. And I have then looked at friends of mine or relatives of mine and thought about them as characters and thought about the reasons they might be insecure or have issues like that, and gone back into what I know about their lives and found for myself, oh, I'll bet you that's the moment where they lost their belief in security. So, tiny example, I have a cousin whose father was a lawyer. Their family was much more well off because my mom was a single mom. But when she was 16, and I do think things that happen at that early teenage age when you're trying to figure out who you are, and then it all goes crazy, then you never figure it out. Her father, who was a lawyer, got caught bribing someone by a cop. and he lost his license, and their
Oh,
lifestyle went away.
oh,
And she
wow.
went from being the homecoming queen, you know, in her freshman year, to being the kid who had to live in a shitty condo because they lost their house. And she's never been comfortable or trusted anybody in the world since then. And I just think that is a perfect match. So I think this is a beautiful way to, that's how humans behave. I think you're exactly right. So that's my example.
Oh, that's really interesting, Roseanne, too. And that also makes me think about, this idea that we all understand we need to have this inciting incident or the catalyst event in our story sort of early on in the story. But it's also, another way of thinking about it, that regardless of what our inciting incident is in the plot, that there was some kind of before and after moment, some kind of event before the story even started, right? That that shapes who those characters are. That's really interesting.
I think it's really true. And we use Casablanca, as most people do, or lots of people do. And of course, you don't see them. That's done in flashback. So when you meet Rick, he's already had that bad moment. We didn't start there linearly. We discovered that was the moment where he lost his ability to care. And then, of course, he gained it back. So I think that's very true. It can happen earlier. And then we just got to hear about it somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll just throw out, this isn't about personal trauma, but I think Aaron Sorkin is very, very good at doing this kind of writing, identifying this clear some childhood issue that is playing out in their adult life. I really, really like the series 1 to 4 of The West Wing. When Aaron Sorkin was writing The West Wing, is like I've seen every one 20 times, and I can watch them on repeat for the rest of my life quite happily. And then as soon as he's not writing it, I am not interested even 0% because it's not Aaron Sorkin. And I really, really liked the what he did with the Josh character, the Bradley Whitford character. How I think was it he did his sister died, I think, when he was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a house fire, and he was a really little boy and he ran out and his older sister died. I think that was it. And there's some episode where Donna, who just understands Josh, like talks about how that defines him as a character and how he's always trying to save people because he thinks that if he doesn't, someone's going to die, sewn into him. And the Molly's Game as well. I think there's
Yeah.
a really nice example of that in Molly's Game, and the whole film becomes about, on an emotional psychological level, it's about her father trauma and how that's still playing out in all aspects of her life, even though you have this really engaging, very conflict-filled plot, lots of plot stuff going on with a really engaging court case and really engaging backstory of the poker game leading up to the court case. Really, the heart of the film is the trauma from her dad. And a really interesting moment I found when the dad kind of talks about reveals to her that she saw him cheating on her mum when she was a little girl and too
Uh-huh.
and too young to remember it.
Uh,
And so and he felt shame because she knew that he cheated on her
uh-huh.
mum, and so he was so cold and difficult to her because he
Yeah.
had. I didn't think it was very realistic that that character had that insight, but I
Yeah.
thought it's so interesting and so engaging, and I love the way he does that. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. That is really, and it's also so interesting too, to just thinking about, the difference between film and television, that with television, there's so much more time, so much more story space to let these reveals come out over time. And then in film, you make a different choice often too. But it doesn't mean that it's not there, and that the knowledge, that our understanding of who these characters are and what's wrong with them, we need to understand it. We need to understand why they have that worldview and how that worldview affects the choices that they make. Any other examples from your own lives, or from film or television is another great way of going.
I can go next. I was trying to find the reason why my family behaves in certain ways, and we're very angry and manipulative, and these like old families or old Greek families, and every family, I suppose. And I was trying to write a feature film, as you said, Anna. And I realized that was a box of toys, trauma toys, if these are toys for screenwriters, anyhow. And I realized that my dad, my dad lived until died recently, relatively so recently. I had this kind of similar feelings to what Rosanna suggested before, because he was very insecure, and he was changing jobs, and he used to say, "I'm going to go to prison, if not today, tomorrow," or something.
Oh,
And we
wow.
didn't, yeah, and we didn't have a kind of a sense of home, like not home as a place, but feeling this kind of a. And I had this kind of feeling of being lost all the time, and it took me quite a long time, for me at least, to start writing authentically, if you want. And I started writing the feature to get this out of me, and like a kind of a autobiographical, but projected to completely different family or something. And then I ended up writing the series, because and it ended up I ended up writing a transgenerational trauma after all.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out about This Is Us.
Oh,
So yeah, it was kind of a revelation how everything is connected, and how little behaviors create trauma that impacts people's lives. But these people do not understand what they're doing. Kind of, they're ignorant of their behavior and how this affects. I mean, like my dad saying, "I'm going to go to prison every second day." I mean, it's not. It doesn't create happy feeling or any. Uh, Even sarcastically, if you want to little kids, it was very scary.
for sure.
So yeah, yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I'm with you with these behaviors. And I think what Stephen King said, that the first 1,000 pages are what we know, and then we start digging and digging and digging, and I ended up writing 10 scripts or so to get into this sort of
Yes.
stage. I was surprised as well. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. That's amazing. Well, and also like it makes, if you were to think about your father as a character too, like what was causing him to be saying this
yeah.
line, right?
He was an orphan. That's why, and he couldn't see, because we're trapped in our mental prisons, aren't we? We
Sure.
cannot see what's in front of us, and
Mhm.
these frames, these walls, are transferred from generation to generation.
Yeah.
So I couldn't see, because I would see nose and closed doors, although these were open. You know what I mean?
Yes, for sure.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah, so yeah, it took me a while to dig into it, really.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting line of dialogue
Yeah,
that ended up having a impact.
yeah, and that's why in my book, the initial, I'm not promoting my book, but I'm just trying to. Um, the original title was "Fall Again, Only to Be a Hero," but then the British publication house, they said that we cannot categorize this title in a kind of a shelf and put it in a specific category. So it's called the art and practice of creative storytelling now. But it came. I tried to put together what you just said in your presentation: the hero's journey and the hero's emotional journey.
Uh-huh.
So we have two journeys interweaved together, leading to catharsis. Because I'm Greek, I have to differentiate
Yeah.
and um, and add to the puzzle of writing. So, and I saw catharsis as a process, not as a final event, as it is viewed. So, and that's how I put these two journeys together. So
That's
it
smart.
started, yeah, it started for me actually. I needed to take this out of myself and observe it, if you want.
Yeah. I mean, and I think all of that personal work that we're all doing is important for our characters, because even if you're writing a thriller, no matter what the genre is, if it's an espionage thriller, we're going to be connected to the characters. So finding a way to make those characters read as authentic is important. Anybody else want to share before I move on to the next?
Yeah, and actually, like since you mentioned thriller, like I've been watching Reacher, like, and you know what's very interesting over there is that like in the first season, like you obviously get the sense that the protagonist is like he has survived a military crisis of some sort, right? Like you don't know too much about his past, but there's clearly like he's suffering from PTSD that governs his behavior, how he interacts with people, he's jumpy, how he speaks, all of that. But what was also interesting was that the second season, like actually just it fleshes out that backstory into an entire plot line. So I think
Ah,
that yeah, so there's actually a lot of sometimes there's so much dramatic potential in an incident of that sort, which I
yeah.
think can translate again very differently depending upon medium. So I think TV obviously gives a lot more potential in that sense compared to film. Yeah, I mean that's I just wanted to share that. It just struck me because you mentioned thriller. But like if I were to talk about an experience from my past, like I think like growing up like I was sort of like I was gay in India at a time, which was like it was a very homophobic society, right? And I was very like I was an effeminate child. I could not hide my sexuality very easily. There was kind of like no hiding in a sense, and I think like then what that sort of left me like as I grew up was like this behavioral mode where I just sort of where I because I knew that I couldn't hide my behavior, I had to find ways to please people in other, like I had to find other ways to please people so that they could see past that, which meant that if people were fighting, like I would, like I've always been like a mediator. Like I was a
Yes.
lawyer at a certain point in my past as well. And a lot of my work was negotiations. And that was a role that I also fulfilled in my family a lot during like times of conflict and things like that. Um, so yeah, like that's one anecdote that I can share, which I guess I'm still sort of working through aspects of that, but that was an interesting like behavioral response to a certain past incident.
Oh, for
And
sure. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, then
and
taking on that role of mediating and pleasing, um, you know, if you were a character, right? Like there's all kinds of potential for conflict there, right? When a
yeah,
character is not tending to their own needs, but instead putting out there for other people, which can, yeah. Mm,
absolutely. And I think like another thing that struck me also was that like I mean I've also been in therapy for many years now, and I think like now I'm coming to a place which is like I'm in a better situation, better relationships with my family members, etc. So I think like I'm also at a place where I look back at the past quite fondly now, which used to be
okay,
very difficult for me, like for many
good.
years. I think
Uh-huh.
like just for a couple of years it's a very new experience for me to be able to look at the past fondly, which has
Yes.
then helped unlock certain memories, and it's fascinating. Like now it's just I'm in a constant state of wonder, like remembering that certain textual details from my past. Um, But yeah, I think like what's very interesting about this approach that you presented is that it does not necessarily have to be just applied to a traumatic incident from the past, but also like what are the positive experiences that also drive our behaviors and actions? Because like say even taking this as us as an example, like a lot of the dramatic value of that show also comes from the fact that all these siblings, these family members are just there for each other, right?
Yeah.
And these are really positive behaviors that also come from certain situations in the past. So I think there's that whole other application of your approach as well.
The positive side of it. And it's
Yeah.
so interesting that you say that too, because when I was giving my talk in October at the film festival, I wasn't thinking about the traumatic event. And instead, what I was thinking about, which the audience really related to, and I posed the question, I said, do you guys all remember, is there a phrase, a negative phrase that somebody said to you at some point that you have played it out in your head? Oh, and everybody's like, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, okay, and what's the flip side of that? Is there a positive phrase that somebody said to you at some time that you've also played that out as a counter to the other? And everybody's like, yeah, And so, there's something about storytelling that events are more dramatic, right? But, it's either going to be action, event, or dialogue. And sometimes words on the positive and negative side are so impactful, right? They can hurt you. Like in Nikki's, I mean, just that, I'm going to go to prison. I'm going to go to prison. I'm going to go to prison. Like, that's just like what, but then there's also the really positive phrases that, some teacher or some neighbor or some child, right? It's an interesting, I'm really glad you mentioned that because it reminded me, yeah, it's very important. Okay, so unless I'm jumping over somebody, Tom, were you wanting to share? There's a mute, like a microphone button in the upper right. Okay. I wish we could, if you shared your screen, we could see it. So what I would love to do next, and this is what I do in the classroom, is come up with a list. And since we're on Zoom instead of in a classroom, maybe we can just drop it into the chat. Just brainstorm. Oh gosh, Chris, I'm seeing all your stuff. Okay, cool.
I saw the opportunity for yet more self-promotion. So feel free to ignore. Feel free to ignore.
Well, I loved your presentation on We Need to Talk About Kevin. I want to see that. Okay, fine. I'll look at that video essay. Well, is it the same video essay that you shared at the? Oh, fine. Yes, it was magnificent. So let's just try this as a quick brainstorm. Dropping into the chat possible. Let's do it. Let's take the traumatic events, but also what about the phrases, the positive or negative phrases? And so think outside of ourselves now and our own experiences. Sometimes it can be even easier to think about, our best friend or what we know about what our best friend, or just make it up completely. But traumatic events, so if we just like sort of start putting a list of traumatic events and or phrases, positive or negative, that might have shaped our character's worldview. Oh, Roseanne. I've experienced that. I have experienced that. Yeah, Chris. This this also what you just said, Chris, makes me think about my mothering. Anna. Oh, be careful. Not that I phrased it that way. Not that I would. Seeing a parent being physically abused by an abusive partner as a young child and being unable to stop it and growing up determined to stop abuse everywhere and anywhere, absolutely. Being dumped a week before prom, sure. Stop hitting your sister, but she hit me first. Did you copy this from a book? It's not yours. It was. Yes. Being bullied at school. You know that did you copy this from a book is so interesting too, because the emotional reaction to that could be so angry. It would be so angry, and then what would you, and then you're put in this position of having to prove yourself
Yeah, exactly.
when you shouldn't have to. And
It was
yeah,
in primary school.
yeah,
I was a kid. I mean, how am I supposed to respond to a teacher who says you copy that?
yes, yes,
So
that's a
it
huge,
was a
that's a
kind paralyzing.
for
at that.
for
Yeah,
sure. Paralyzing is a good word for that, because and you wouldn't think so. You could think that it could make you feel proud, like, oh, she thinks this was so good that but you could see how it could go the other way. Knowing that a parent is dishonest and manipulative, becoming cynical, seeing dishonesty everywhere, distrusting power, for sure. Yes. You have another C in math. Why can't you get an A like your brother? Yes. Yes, my husband has a memory of, he had a B on he was an all A student. I think he was like number 3 in his high school class or something, and he got a B, and his mother was like, "What happened here?" He has that phrase, "What happened here?" in his memory. Hmm. Being a caregiver for someone who's unable to get better. Yeah. Oh, that's your feet are crooked. You need to train to be normal. You need to learn to walk in a straight line. That's big, Clarissa. I can still remember getting a D in handwriting in the 5th grade. Yeah, in handwriting. I'll give you my handwriting story. The person who taught typing in high school was also the teacher. What do you call it? Like wood making, like what's that called? Anyway, he was missing 2 fingers, and he was the typing teacher, so we all learned. Is that not hysterical? He had lost 2 fingers, and like so we all learned to type in the wrong way, which still holds true to this day. Did you draw this poorly on purpose? Oh my goodness. Oh, that is a horror. Oh, that's a horror. Yes, yes. it is those little moments, those, and that, you know, because which goes back to what you said before, Ashish, that, you know, these events don't have to be these massive, big, huge things. It really can be this tiny little thing that somebody said to you that can be so empowering or so destructive, and that you might just not know. And that the person who says it didn't have bad intentions at all. And we remember them for decades. And exactly. And that, and it does affect us too. You know, Nikki, when you were saying that about, I'm going to go to prison, I still remember this moment when, my parents never used to go out when I was young. Like they never went out on fancy dates or anything. And they went out on a date and my mother had makeup on and she never used to wear makeup. And then she said, do you have money in your piggy bank? Because you know, she was just joking. It was like some kind of joke, but I remember it like it was a terrifying moment of like, oh, do you not have enough money to go on a date? You know, these just these tiny little things can change the way potentially, right? And so as we're building out a character, you know, I guess that's something that I talk to the students about too. You know, I love ensemble films. It's something that I, for a period of time, studied a lot of ensembles, multi-protagonist films, and the ones that I think are done well versus the ones that I think are not done well. And the ones that aren't done well, in my opinion, it seems like they have this sort of thematic idea for it. And then it's like, okay, let's put all the different, what are the types of characters? Okay, one who's pregnant, one who can't get pregnant, one who, right. And it like they're trying to like come up with and then retroactively make it authentic, and it doesn't read that way. Whereas if we start from this place of authenticity of like what is that backstory, it doesn't necessarily need to add up in anybody else's viewpoint, but as long as it does for us, as long as we understand why that affected them in that way. No, it was so good to see you, Roseanne. It was so nice to see you with your teen. Yes. Well, this has been so much fun for me. I appreciate you guys. I would love any feedback too on this as well, because some of this is stuff that I've been doing with the students in different ways, and some of it also is kind of new and just sort of putting it together in a way that I can share with you. So would be delighted for feedback as well. It's about these.
I'll just stop the recording and then
sure.
just before the feedback. I'll stop it now.